Okay, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, a big warm welcome to Anna Roberts, my amazing colleague, friend, and mentor. Okay? Not the only white person here. Anna represents a caucus of people that I belong to as a newcomer. I'm an elected member of parliament for only 2 minutes, 2 years. Not even in July it'll be 2 years. And entering parliament in the environment that I did was a day when Justin Trudeau named India for the attack that had happened on Canadian soil. A terrible moment for Canada, a terrible moment in our relations with India, primarily because it started to erode an argument that we were already struggling to win. I have a few thoughts, if I might be able to share that with you. First and foremost, I've spent the last 20 years, for those of you who may not know much of me, fighting extremism, terrorism in Canada and around the world. I lived and worked in Iraq and Afghanistan from 2005 to 10. I served Prime Minister Harper as foreign policy advisor. I was the leader of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute's foreign policy and national security practice, which published the mighty Mujal Dosanjh, Terry Molesky, Chris Alexander, and others in reports that have been written through double-blind academic tests, high-quality research, presented before the country and our national security agencies. People attempted to cancel it by the idea of mob rule, by pretending that the reports were somehow sectarian creeds against one community or another. They never produced any evidence of that, which is why the reports still stand and contribute to our national life, not just in Canada, but around the world. I say this because I said on Monday at Air India Memorial, where I was there to commemorate a person who had been killed in that flight that's very close to my own family. Now, in 1985, I was 5 years old. A teenage girl boarded a flight from Vancouver, just out of high school, to go visit her grandparents in Kolkata. That girl was Anumita Gupta, and she was killed over the skies of Ireland in this terrorist attack, the largest civil aviation attack in Canadian history. I didn't have a problem naming her murderers, but the people on the internet did. And they come with the allegations that they have to every person in this room for being agents of some other country, for being disloyal to our country, for refusing to stand for the rule of law, for the dignity of every victim of hate crimes, terror crimes, any crimes. So I'm here to proudly say I am a strong and proud Canadian patriot. I am born in Calgary. I have served my country in every single minute of every single day ever since and before I ran for office. I will continue to do so. I have promised the great people of Calgary heritage I will fight threats, domestic and foreign, and I will do so without being cowed by the mob. But let's talk a little bit about, in closing, some of the amazing conversations you've had today. I haven't had the opportunity to join you all day, but I have been following each and every one of you in your work in various forums, and I'm ecstatic that across disciplines, from the press to people who influence public opinion, to experts, to leaders of all political stripes, to both Tough SIG as well as Canada-India Foundation, bridging continents and religions, that people have come together on the basis of shared values to assess threats of international crime, international terror, radicalization, extremism, foreign interference. These are all very difficult issues. They're made even more difficult in the age that we live today, an age defined by three massive disruptions. The first disruption is that of what we call multipolarity, of authoritarians and tyrannies around the world, dragging the poles of power across the face of the earth and challenging the post-Cold War rules-based system that we'd all been so accustomed to. The second disruption of being populism, both on the left and on the right, too often with condescension on one side, anger on the other. Populism that gives rise to mob rule that betrays truth in history, truth in justice, mob rule that goes after the minority and vilifies the minority, caricatures the minority, mob rule that has been eroding trust in all democratic institutions across the Western world for decades now. And third, the big disruption of technology that now allows us to connect across continents in ways that we have never been able to before, that is reshaping how we communicate, how we heal, how we learn, how we do science, but technology also that comes under abuse by bad actors, and raises powerful questions about what is the domain of the state, what is the domain of large corporations, and how do we protect civil liberties and individual freedoms in this era. I say all this because in this moment, in our country and across much of the Western world, we see across our institutions, our media, our bureaucracy, our academy, our law enforcement, an indoctrinated ideology, not one focused on critical thinking and actual truth. An indoctrination that only says one point of view is legitimate and any questioning of those points of view are somehow treasonous. We've come to a place in this country where we cannot have a debate, a dialogue, a discussion, the very things, the very tools that animate our democracy and builds trust in institutions. And it's manifested in horrible ways. We have seen the national security decisions being made by the Trudeau government on the trucker convoy based on a report from the CBC, not national security considerations. We have seen that questions of terrorism and colonial history are borrowed from the pages of the New York Times rather than actual historical record. And it informs how we think about massive international conflicts today, whether it is the one that Israel is fighting in self-defense from Hamas terrorism, in the worst terrorist attack in this century, the worst attack upon the Jews since the Holocaust. We have seen an unfortunate victimization and re-victimization of not just the state of Israel and the people who dwell there to defend their borders and their peace, but on Jewish life in Canada. Over the last decade, hate crimes are up 250%, and yet 75% of all hate crimes in Canada are concentrated on less than 1% of our population. There is a moral sickness in our country that needs to be confronted. Now, there are some disruptors that have emerged in this age of indoctrination. People in independent media, people who have been on the stage, people who in think tanks and across the academy fight for truth. And for the first time in 10 years, we've seen our national security documents released this year name extremists for what they are, which they changed 10 years prior. It was when national security agencies in Canada diminished naming a specific threat, one of the top threats to the cohesion of our country, that instigated that initial report that Terry Molesky wrote for the MacDonald-Laurier Institute describing Khalistan as a project of Pakistan. That is the beginning of a first stage where we can actually begin to confront these threats together. So let me conclude with this. The journey ahead will not be easy. It will be difficult. It will require backbone and courage, and it will require us not to indulge the worst excesses of our base instincts. It is easy when under threat and under intimidation to grow more tribal, to turn to those from our own common points of reference. But let me be very clear. We should speak truth. We should see clearly. We should stand with strength, not on sectarian agendas, but with common values. Common values to uphold the freedoms of our land, freedoms to protect the minority from the mob, freedoms to celebrate the most sacred minority, that of the rights and conscience of the individual person. We must also stand strong and clearly and explain to all of the communities affected that make these decisions that advocacy that incites violence and terror does not constitute free speech. They are crimes of hate, they are crimes of terror, and they must be enforced by every level of government. And we should not be afraid to name them, whether they are Hamas, Hezbollah, or Khalistan. We should not be afraid to stand for the communities that they affect or the communities they belong to. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you in these concluding remarks. I wish you all the very best in your next iteration of these discussions, and I invite you to come do so in Ottawa. Thank you very, very much.
A really important conference like that, and no mainstream media showed up, but we are here to show you the other side of the story. So if you appreciate our work and you want to support us, please go over rebelfieldreports.com, chip in whatever you want, couple of bucks, to help us to continue to show you the other side of the story, because I drove from Montreal to Toronto to show you. Thanks.